Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about Delita EX, and I'm just going to give my thoughts and my ideas on how to use him and how to play with him. So first of all, before I do anything, I just want to say thanks to War Divisions Calc for all the information. I just want to make sure I do that at the beginning because I think sometimes I forget to thank them. Okay, so before we start into anything, this is going to be the disclaimer. First thing is, this is not a meta conversation. Delita is an 80 cost unit, so I think it's foolish to compare him to basically anyone recent or like Astrius or any 100 cost unit. Obviously Delita is not going to be a meta changer, so I don't think it's that great to be talking about him in that sense. Second of all, this is not pulling advice. It's up to you what you want to pull. I would say pull your favorite characters. I am not trying to convince you either way, so that's not what this video is. Second of all, this is not a recommendation. This is not really a review video. I'm calling this an overview. I'm just going to talk about what I think I'm going to do with him, and then maybe you guys can get some ideas from that. I'm going to talk about my potential that I see in him. Okay, so that being said, Delita himself, I think with these updates, I think he's more of a generalist than necessarily being specialized for anything, and that's why he's not really going to be able to compare to like any kind of meta conversation. He's just going to be a unit that you use if you like, try to make him work or not, which happens to be my favorite type of unit. He's not popular and he's a rerun, so a rerun unit is basically an old out-of-date unit being turned into something somewhat usable, so that doesn't always work out. And compared to the other units in this collaboration, he's probably the least popular. He has not really been that popular in previous FFBE games, so he's probably not going to get the greatest treatment. He's not going to be a moneymaker, so he's not going to get the best treatment. Okay, and finally, this is just theorycraft. These are my ideas. The final judgment will come with testing. I'm recording this like at the update, so technically I can check right now, but it's going to take a few days of like arena battles and everything to sort of test this out. So that's pretty much what I have for you. Okay, so let me just let Delita tell it in his own way with his own words. "'Tis your birth and faith that wrong you, not I, or in other words, blame yourself or God." Or in this case, Hiroki or whoever's in charge of unit balance. So that's just to say that if you want to like try to figure if he's a good meta unit, that's your own problem. This is not what this video is. Okay, with all that being said, let's get started. Okay, so what is actually new with Delita? Let's start with his MA2. There's a couple of good things here. First of all, we have the the usual fire ally buff that everybody wants, so that's there. The first thing on this list is actually reduce the physical damage taken by 50% for 3 times. So I wanted to just double check this because it doesn't mention whether this is a barrier or not in the translation, but now that we actually have the update on the global side, it does say it's a barrier, so I assume that it's breakable. But 3 times of a barrier is actually not that bad, so that's going to give him a little bit of survivability. Okay, and then aside from that, I think that increased damage 20%. I forgot whether it was 10% before or 20%, but it's not, it's nothing crazy. But with the last little update there, the defense penetration 30 for self, I think that's going to be a little bit better. And as we're going to see in a little bit, I feel like that can add up to not only his attack damage, but also his other, we're going to see in a second here. So one of his 3 EX updates is acquired AP up. So normally it just does that first skill there. It just gives 50% more AP generation. So I think that's, pretty decent for what it is. Second thing, now it's gonna give 25 accuracy, so mine's already level 20, so 25 accuracy is gonna be for me, so I think that's gonna be helpful. Probably not gonna be super duper impactful, but it's gonna be helpful because there's a lot of evasion nowadays. And last but not least, it increases slash attack resistance penetration. So again, on its own, that's not that much, but considering he also gets defense penetration in his master ability, I think that's actually going to be pretty decent, because unless it's going to be a unit that has a lot in one or the other, I think the whatever unit you're going to be hitting, it's going to have one or the other, so they're not going to have that high of a value. So having both of them combined, I think it's actually going to be pretty useful to go against either one, right? So I think that's going to be useful in that sense. Okay, so his second upgrade is kind of like one of the worst upgrades I've seen, and that is for Karma Blade. So it's basically staying exactly the same, and the only difference is that it's going to be lower AP. I mean, granted, that does make a pretty good difference. Being in the 20s versus being in the 30s is a pretty decent difference, especially when you're using it a couple of times in a battle. I don't think that's going to be super useful for PvP. You're probably only going to use it once, if that. Like, you're probably not even going to use it, if I'm being honest. I think that's going to be better for raids. Delita is actually a really good raid unit, so I think that's going to be really good for raids, and it's going to be make him usable for raids. And his level 25 ability, it's called in JP the JP translation is Bite Ice Wolf Break. Let's call it Ice Wolf Break, but it's actually called Crush Accessory Plus on the global side. And what that does is that it dispels auto revive or re-raise basically for whoever gets hit. And that is actually a really useful skill if you can land it. So also what I wanted to point out here is that it actually has some pretty decent range. It's going to be one of his best range attacks. So we're going to get into that a little bit deeper. Okay, so I basically just compiled all his attacks that have like pretty decent range and pretty good damage. So usually when I think of like a damaging attack, I like to think of Hazard Break on the soldier side. It's probably one of the stronger attacks in terms of just like percentage of damage. I think it's XL or L, and it's 225%. So if we look at his new skill, which is now called Crush Accessory Plus, you can see that it's actually 200%. So it's most of the way there to that 225%. And in terms of AP, it's pretty close to the almost exactly the same amount. So that's pretty good. And it actually has one range, and I think it's just about the same AoE height. War of the Visions Calc has it as undefined for Hazard Break, but I think I recall it having a 1 height. I'm pretty sure it's going to be pretty easily comparable. So I think the new attack is going to be good. I don't think you really need to have him in Soldier anymore, which is good because now you can either have him in his main job for that Meditate, for the AP generation, or you can have him in Paladin, which I think is going to be a pretty good class for him. So again, another spell to compare here is Taunting Blade. Pretty much the same range and effect as Taunting Blade, except Taunting Blade is a really high AP cost, so you're probably, gonna use that a little less. And then last but not least is his Limit Burst. His Limit Burst is actually really good. 60% chance to inflict silence. That is actually really good. And I think that kind of opens up a little bit now that he's like up to date in terms of stats and everything. I think that opens up a little bit more of a support type of way to play Delita. Okay, so looking at all these skills, they're all basically generally very similar. The problem that I'm already seeing here, and I think this was a problem in the JP version, is his AI is just gonna not know what to do. So I think you're gonna have to decide for yourself what you want to have enabled on him, and you probably want to only have maybe 2 of these on. So the new skill is going to be on his main job, so you can use it with whatever build you want, and so is his Limit Burst, so you can sort of just decide which one you want. Taunting Blade is like super expensive, and I'm not sure if we're ever gonna get a Sentinel Paladin update, or you know how we've been getting updates for the jobs. I'm not sure if we're ever gonna get an update for Paladin, but hopefully if that is an update, hopefully Taunting Blade becomes less of an AP hog to use. I think that would be really great, but so far I don't think it's come down in the JP side, so I don't think that's something we can really expect. So unless you're playing a defensive build on Delita, I probably would want to go for his Limit Burst and the new skill, because I think those are kind of his most useful ways of being used. Okay, so moving onward, let's talk about a defensive build. So part of my hope in Delita was I've sort of been using like fire teams with limited cost content, and I feel like it's actually been working pretty well. My go-to team is either Rain, Terra, and Adelard as my low-cost unit, or Rain, Terra, and Summer Ketone. If it's not really like cost limited, I think that's a pretty fun team to play. The thing I see for cost limited here is, you know, obviously if you're going to be playing defense, if you're going to be using a defensive unit for fire, Kingmont is going to be your go-to for that. But he is obviously 100 cost, as we can see all the way on the right side. So I've been kind of using Rain lately, and I kind of just been wanting an equivalent cost tank. I sort of completely forgot Raldor even existed, but actually Raldor is probably what I was looking for this whole time. However, I think now that Delita's out, he does have some other... He's not necessarily better or worse than Raldor, but he does have some different things that Raldor doesn't have. So I think Delita can be a potential option for that. If we look here at the defensive stats, there is very clearly a difference here between all the units. So Kingmont and Raldor obviously are topping this out. Obviously, like I said, Kingmont is the best. Raldor in terms of defense, I think he's going to be pretty good. So these stats are with the best defensive support skill. So Raldor is going to be pretty good in terms of that. Rain is obviously more for the spirit side of things, and Delita is kind of just like a middle ground person. This is why I say he's more of a generalist more than a specialist. So for Delita, thing is he's kind of off by about 10 points, which is actually a lot and can make a lot of difference, especially with all the defense penetration and, you know, slash penetration and whatnot running around in this game. I think 16 defense is not really all that much. However, you can definitely add to that with your Esper, with your vision cards, with your equipment, and I think even with Trust Stones. So it's not the worst thing. It does contribute a little bit more to having to get through with defense penetration. So I think that he's going to be a decent option for a tank when it comes to cost limited content. Okay, so the other thing to point out here is that everyone else has way more HP than Delita does, but the thing is that with his master ability skill that he's going to have that barrier on by default, you're essentially giving him double the HP with that barrier. So considering it's going to be for 3 hits, generally, even with that barrier on, even if he's getting hit with physical attacks, I don't really think he's going to be surviving like that much more than 3 hits. So I think 3 hits is actually pretty decent for that. Now, granted, like I mentioned before, it does mention that it's a barrier, so it's probably going to be able to be dispelled, which, I mean, that's going to have to be something that we deal with. But I think he's got a pretty good shot of having decent defense. Thinking to another tank like Engelbert, I think Engelbert starts off at around 36 or 38, so that is a huge difference. Engelbert is not 100 cost, so that is actually a huge difference in terms of tanking. So let's continue onward here. In terms of resistances, I would say that it it's pretty much on average pretty equal. It's just really a matter of what you want to tank. Obviously Slash is going to be a pretty useful one, so Delita gets a slight edge there. Obviously King Mon has the best, and Magic is going to be another one, but both Delita and Raldor are pretty bad in terms of Magic. In terms of equipment, Delita actually does have access to heavy armor, and Raldor and Rain do not. Obviously King Mon is a premium unit, so he does. But I sort of found that that doesn't really make that much of a difference. It does add up to a few more points of defense, and it does add up to maybe a couple of more points in terms of slash resistance and, you know, whatever XYZ resistance. Another thing with Delita is he's the only one with courage on, you know, in terms of the defensive possible fire units. Technically Terra has courage as well. Terra is a whole nother beast, so we're not really talking about her right now. So that's gonna help a little bit more with his survivability. So in my opinion, in terms of actually surviving as a tank, I think Delita has pretty decent capabilities here. In terms of Magic, he's gonna get roasted completely. I 100% will say that, but he does have a decent chance. He does have a chance of taking away the hate, and he does have a decent chance of getting in there and using his limit burst. I think his limit burst would be really good. Like, that's his one saving grace against Magic. He could potentially silence the Magic users, and then he actually can become like ridiculously strong at that point, because the Magic units are going to be hitting him with physical attacks, and if you have him with high defense, then he's going to be good. So I think that's a pretty good thing about Delita. Alright, so just kind of want to get into it like slightly further, but not really too deep. These are kind of two armors that I think are going to be stand out in terms of standing out from just wearing regular clothes. Respectively, I think the Brigandine and the Platinum armor. Brigandine has area resistance, and Platinum armor has single target resistance. I think it has something else. I forgot exactly what it was, but comparable. I think those are going to be two good things to have. I'm going to say the area resistance is going to be slightly better because of here what we have are two specific vision cards that I think are going to be a little bit better for Delita. Fire units, fire tanky people. Obviously he's going to have access to other generic vision cards, but I think in terms of fire specific vision cards, these are going to be pretty good ones. Obviously, you know, the specific Delita card going to be good on him, going to help him with accuracy. He does have that little bit of accuracy in his master ability, but I think in today's meta, a little bit more accuracy will help, as much accuracy as you can get. And in terms of Death Machine, I think with the Brigandine, combine those two together, that gives you a pretty decent amount of area resistance, and it's also going to give you some critical evasion, so that's going to help a little bit more in terms of survivability. Okay, so here's a little bit of a shortcoming, and I'm going to be honest, at first I misread his master ability. I thought it was for 3 turns, but I think 3 hits is actually better, because I think that's going to allow him to take another extra turn, maybe 2 extra turns, but he's going to be able to get his attacks in, his limit burst, his re-raise the spell, so I think that's actually going to be pretty good. But the shortcoming is that if you're going to use him as a defensive unit, as a tank, you probably want him to be able to run in there, so you probably want move +1, and most likely you're going to want his acquired AP up, his new EX skill, because that gives him a little bit more accuracy and a little bit more damage dealing. However, there's a third skill that you might want on him if you're playing him as a defensive unit, and that would be his Holy Knight's Protection, because you're going to want that extra defense, you're going to want that extra HP. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a shortcoming here where you have to pick 2. I am suggesting some TMRs here that do give a little bit extra move, but that's going to take away from your buffing turns. You want him to cast Immortal Spirit at first, like you may want him to cast Sentinel. Depending on what you're doing, you might want him to cast other stuff. And a lot of times you only have enough time to cast one, and neither of like the ones that you want to cast aren't really like AoE, so he's not really going to be walking towards his teammate and taking sort of that extra turn before going to the opponent. So that's something to watch out for when you're sort of making the defensive build and trying to decide which support skills to have. Okay, so in terms of an attack build, I want to compare him to other slash attackers. I feel like that makes the most sense. These are the higher damage, higher attack slashers in the fire team. So I kind of just want to make a comparison to them. I think Delita is actually pretty good in terms of this. Fire, I feel like it's a little bit lacking in terms of a really strong slasher. Technically, Terra is, but on the attack side, considering that Seymour is an MR unit and he's basically one of the better ones. I think he was the best one for quite some time. He's actually technically better than Ildira, but Ildira does more damage based on poison and stuff like that. So Delita's, he's got more attack than Ildira does, and he's actually pretty comparable in terms of penetration. So as we can see here, Ildira has 20 to 40 penetration, defense penetration, so that really that's going to be 40, and 25 max accuracy. So she has a built-in 10 extra accuracy and 10 extra penetration compared to Delita, and she also has slash attack. So this one is a little bit different because it depends on how many times she gets hit. If she gets hit 2 times, that kind of just goes away. So that's sort of an interesting thing that she has. But Delita actually has 10 more penetration than she does, so I think he's actually pretty comparable in terms of that, and he's got a higher attack stat. So this is with support skills equipped, so he's actually got a pretty decent attack stat compared to Ildira. Seymour, he's got the 30 penetration, and then he's got 20 more from his card. So granted, you will have to use one of your slots for his card for that, but you know, I think it's kind of funny how he's just like really strong. But I think Delita is still doing pretty well in terms of that. I think he is actually slightly better than our other options. Okay, so this is I think what most people are here for, if I'm being honest here. I think we all secretly wish that Delita can have some sort of magic meta, some sort of special, you know, this is the thing that makes him unique, and this is the thing that makes him stand out above the rest. I'm here to say that he actually does have sort of a decent ability to do magic damage. Granted, this is not serious. He's not going to be top of the line here. He's not going to be meta magic damage. And also you got to consider that he only has 1 magic attack. So if you're really going to be building him for magic, you better hope that this goes in there and destroys, which I don't think is going to do. So the actual use case for this is not really that great. Fire Ragged Blade does actually have range, but it doesn't really have AoE, so I am not recommending to use it, but it's actually there. Okay, so if we take a look at this, and let's think back to when Delita originally came out, he didn't really have anything for magic. He doesn't have any magic buffs, so it's just like whatever he has and whatever the equipment has. So yeah, but the thing is now over time, we've actually had a lot of equipment and vision cards, espers, etc. that can actually boost him. So if we're going to be using a magic Delita, which again, I'm not recommending, this is kind of a build that I sort of came up with. You can sort of, there's other options for this, but this is just kind of something that I came up with. The first thing there is Terra's Sword. If you get the magic variant, it's actually really strong. the added ability doesn't really give. I thought it was fire attack up, but it doesn't really benefit Delita that much. It does give slash. No, it gives spirit penetration. So the funny thing is he is going to be able to do damage against high spirit units. So that's actually pretty good. You know, I think it's about 20. So anything beyond 20, it's a little crazy, right? We also have the Soul of Tamasa that actually has a magic stat attached to it. So it's actually pretty good. I think it also gives him magic resistance. So hey, maybe he'll survive one extra magic attack. And then next up we have Garble's TMR. Doesn't really have a magic stat on it, but it has a magic buff. So if you want to go crazy and try to do more magic damage, you can do that if you really want to. Next up, the Esper that I chose is Typhon. Typhon has nodes for slash attack up and for magic stat up. So again, I think that fits pretty well for like Terra or Delita as a magic unit. We have the Encounter of Heroes card, which gives more magic stat and actually strike resistance. And I think accuracy is only in the JP version for everyone, but in the global version, it's only for King Mont and for Rain, for both Monts and Rain. And then we have Ramu just to add that extra little bit of magic in his sub VC slot. And if we look at the total there, it's 674. So, or hold on, my bad. 674 is just without any equipment. So this is actually the total with all the equipment, 1057. And if we look at Terra, which is the top of the line fire magic slasher in the game, she has a total of 1469. So she's only 400 or so, 350 or so off from Delita. Again, that is actually a pretty big difference. And again, I am not recommending Delita as a magic. Like, don't use this build, but this is just to sort of see the potential that he can actually do. If you actually want to use Firaga Blade, then sure, throw on like maybe one magic thing, but like don't make a fire build. I think the reason you'd want to use Firaga Blade is if you are going against a very strong physical tank like an Engelbert, for example, and they have that magic weakness. So Delita, the AI might decide to just use Firaga Blade and do damage on the magic side of things. I think that's probably going to be the actual usefulness for Firaga Blade. And of course, just to hammer it in there, this is not a serious suggestion. We have other fire slashers that are better than Delita, and as you can see, comparing to the base stats, they're all about 300 plus more than Delita, which, I mean, again, he is somewhat comparable if you have all that crazy magical equipment on him. But again, there's better options in terms of fire magic slashers, so feel free to use any of those other options. I will say, however, that 3 of these total units are limited, so if Delita is your only option for magic fire slash, then you know, maybe you can get it to work, but again, I am not recommending to do that. So that's pretty much it. The punchline with Delita. Okay, so let's read what we have here. Delita is a niche unit. He's not going to be for every account. You're going to have to build him certain ways. You're going to have to fit him into your team, play with a fire team, etc. So that's where Delita is actually useful. Again, he's not going to be a metal unit. Don't pull for him if he doesn't fit onto your account. Just don't do it. He can be used as a low-cost tank, as I've kind of just been saying before. He's got support skills that can be useful in the right situations. So again, he does have the ability to do attack damage, but I think his usefulness and what's going to stand out for him is having his limit burst with silence, having the new ability to dispel re-raise, and having, if you have him on his main job, he has Judgment Blade, which does stop. I don't think that's as high of a chance as landing as the limit burst, But hey, if you're going to be using Delita, he's weak to magic anyway, so you might as well use him with high faith, and you do have that immortal spirit if you do want to try to survive another turn. And sort of the last thing to mention about him is that he's the strongest fire slasher attacker attack wise. So physically he is the strongest, as you saw in that previous slide. He does have comparable penetration to Ildira. Granted, Ildira will be able to use poison and potentially do a little bit more damage. So in terms of that, I think Delita is going to be a great use for that. All right, so those are my thoughts on Delita, and basically, yeah, if you can sort of use him in any of those sorts of ways, I think he's going to be a fun unit to play with. And I think that to me is what this game is about, having fun with your favorite units, and I'm definitely going to have as much fun as I can with him. I'm excited to build him. I don't know how long it's going to take me to build him, but I will try to build him as soon as possible, and maybe record some arena runs, or whatever it is I can record with him. So alright guys, as usual, thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. Take care of yourselves and good luck with your pulls. Peace out.